Hey guys, Steven here today, and today I want to talk to you about fucking swag lanes. And this really builds on the previous videos of the series, so I highly advise you to check that out because it's very comprehensive, and I made this to be extremely comprehensive and to essentially build on each other. And if you've seen the other videos, you'll have a better context as to what I'm talking about and how to make it fit for you concretely, right? Because that's what it's about. You're not just trying to hear theory, but practical fucking advice, right? So, I've been mulling over this for forever, and I didn't know how to make it less abstract of a concept than it already is in my head. Or like a fuck ton of notes, ways I would break it down. But then I ultimately realized that if I kind of talked about the slipstream, and what I mean by that, I think it would help build on it and make more things sense, right? Help make sense of things. So what do I mean by a slipstream, right? And I guess this is where fuck niggas that like say that math and all that shit is useless. Well, this is where you can prove them wrong, right? Let's go back to the concept of vectors in calculus, right? How an object, and I'll say if you're taking classes like, I think it's rigid body mechanics or statics. Yeah. Rigid body mechanics, and then statics for fucking angles. This will really help even more, make more sense to you, right? But the idea of the vector is essentially in space, right? In an environment devoid of gravity. Basically, objects stay in motion until acted upon by another force, right? So that means that if you're at rest, you stay at rest, and if you're in motion, you stay in motion, right? In other words, if you're flying through space, you're just flying along until you hit something, and that's when you lose momentum or all the attributes that are attributed to motion, right? Now, my point in bringing this up is that if you think about soccer and the game, the structure, the sacred geometry of the game, and then all the variables in hand, it's almost a closed environment, meaning as long as the fucking ref isn't doing some fuck shit and there's people who aren't like fucking with the lines of the field of the game and all that, and there's no cheating whatsoever or tampering of. And anyway, it's seemingly a closed environment, meaning if something happens in there, you will feel it. Kind of like that tensegrity model that I keep mentioning, right? Something happens on this side of the field, you'll feel it on that side of the field, right? That's what I mean by closed environment. Now, because of that also, and the fact that essentially, if you think about it, there is only a certain set or a certain combination of plays. And plays in this term I'll define as position of the ball from one spot to another, right? There's only a select amount, essentially, of options, or a select amount of possibilities that can occur in the game, right? One possibility is running straight down the middle or the free line of the field, right? The other possibility, and that's very unlikely, right? Usually what happens is they're kind of veering along it, kind of like in a wave, right? Another possibility is the ball starts here, gets moved to the sidelines, gets moved along the sidelines, gets passed back to the center or to the opposite side, and then there's like a shot of some sort, right? Another possibility is the ball just starts from the sidelines, runs down the sideline, and then goes to the goal. Again, to constrain this even further, we're saying that there's a select number of possibilities based on the goal of the game. The objective of the game is to get the ball into the opponent's goal, right? So based on that, there's only so many things you can do, right? Run down the sidelines, shoot. Run down the middle, shoot, or ping pong along the sidelines and the middle and the other sideline until you get close enough and shoot, right? Those are essentially all the variations of possibilities of what can occur, right? So that means that essentially you have creativity in the way that you express these things, meaning one person, maybe due to the way they're built, their body, physical capabilities, etc., will cross over 1,000 times, and then he'll put the ball in like a perfect state of motion to where he can either get a perfect shot off or a pass that's extremely conducive, etc. Another person can literally just trap the ball and pass it, right? Another person can literally just run alongside everyone as they're like just moving this play closer and closer to the goal without ever even really having touched the ball physically, right? There's all these creative manifestations of these possibilities, but if you think about it, they're all essentially the same, right? Because they're all essentially the same, my belief is like there is essentially sort of like there are roads that are created, like magnetic lines, right? Because of the virtue of human beings and the electromagnetic system entity that we are, right? Our energy is essentially leaving carbon footprints all alongside the field. And so whenever, for example, I guess you could say this is kind of seen, for example, if a part of the field is used often, you'll see foot tracks, right? And so what these foot tracks are actually concretely is the grass having been crushed so many times that it's actually taken the imprint of that foot, right? Or of that movement. So now because it's been worked, it's actually been made more conducive to ball movement, right? And so that's what I mean by slipstream. Everything is essentially creating this sort of conducivity to them. Every single thing, right? And so my point is, if you're cognizant of that, you can actually take advantage of it. So now, how do you become cognizant of it? It goes back to vectors, right? If you see vector, and I'll throw down the way I feel is more conducive to think about it. It's like you want to think about the direction that the person is going in, and then you also want to think about the force or how fast they're moving in that direction, right? And so by thinking about things in terms of vectors, you have a higher chance of actually predicting where they're going to be, and then furthermore take advantage of that knowledge, of that probability, right? If you know that this person is coming this way, you can actually time your movement to meet them, right? And this works both offense and defense. Now, to go back to slipstream, if you can understand that a person is moving this way, you can actually increase the probability of that play working by making their slipstream more potent. Now, I guess, kind of step back and just develop this idea of slipstream more. The way I like to believe it is like in the same way that everything has a vector, because we're all human beings and we're all essentially leaving energetic footprints. We're all also essentially creating slipstreams. So by virtue of being on the field, there is literally a slipstream being created in front of you and behind you, and then somewhat both. So this is you, both vertically and then horizontally. Those are like the two main slipstreams that are being created. And so what that means is it makes it more conducive or easier for you to make what do you call lateral? Wait, is that lateral? Movements in this way and that way that are more conducive to something good for your team, right? Like strafing left and right will actually cut off maybe an opponent's slipstream and essentially increase the probability of your team collecting the ball, whether immediately or the moment after, right? Another way of thinking about it for those of it's like if you've heard of chakras, right? And you know they're like fields of energy in the body. And then if you kind of delve deeper, you might have heard of like fucking auras, right? And how like human body itself creates a field of energy that extends beyond the physical body itself, right? Now just imagine that this very field, instead of after maybe a certain radius, beyond that radius, it actually, instead of just moving out, like emanating from the source that is you, your physical body, instead of like beyond like a certain radius, it actually, beyond a certain radius, instead of just keep expanding, it actually just condenses. So it gets bigger, and then at some point it actually just becomes this line, like a laser beam, right? And it actually points in the direction of where your attention is, right? Most of the time. I feel like a trained meditation fucking master, it like ever so pervades like all areas, not just that part, right? But like like the beam gets bigger, it expands, it might even regain the form of the radius, kind of like when it is closer to the source that is your physical body, right? But that's essentially the gist of the slipstream. It's like this laser view, this energy wrapped, if you want, that's like behind you and in front of you, and it gets magnified by you using it, right? So if you're running in the direction of the slipstream, then most likely it will get magnified, right? If you're doing things like making sure that whoever, or if you're constantly, well, basically I'll just end it like that. It's essentially the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And how do you use it? By running its in direction. Now to go back, most slipstreams, again, tying back to the geometry and the purpose of the game, most slipstreams ultimately point towards the goal, right? Because everyone's attention is on scoring the goal. So that's where every single iota of your energy is devoted towards. And so when you're creating unconsciously that slipstream, it's actually pointing to the goal. Now what happens is there are opponents in front of you, right? So going back to physics, right? There's an object in front of you. And so what happens is, depending on how much of an interference and how thick your slipstream is, your slipstream might either get diverted, right? Or it might get cut off completely outright, right? And if you, for example, have taken like networking classes, you hear about like signals, right? And waves and interference, right? When you're talking about setting up wireless networks, right? And how obstacles in the way can actually bounce the signal off, or it can outright prevent it from reaching its end goal. And it's the same thing in soccer, right? It's the same thing, meaning that when you're running sometimes, you will feel like the ball is like fully in control, right? In your control. But then as like someone gets closer and closer, you'll actually feel as if there's like this weight, this pressure being put on the ball and like almost impeding its freedom of movement. Maybe like you were able to like easily make a stop and a turn into another direction, or you were easily able to do some sort of footwork, and then by the closer and closer someone gets to you, you almost feel like you can't. Not only do you feel like you can't, but you feel like it's almost like as if the state of the ball, right? The motion, the forces of the motion, the forces of motion acting upon the ball are actually being influenced and tampered with by some external force, right? Another way of visualizing it is like FIFA, and like I'm actually gonna refer to this a lot in this video because it's like it's like if I can use a picture and something that you already know and relate with, and it just makes communicating this a lot easier, right? But if you hold X, right, you'll feel what it does is it doesn't make a hard, you don't put like your hard foot in there, but what you're doing is you're what I call pushing, right? It's like you're it's like a non-physical pressure, right? And by doing that, you're actually causing whoever has the ball to veer, to go in the other way, right? So if you hold X, your player will start moving towards them, and they'll be forced to go that way or this way, right? And so that's essentially how you cut off or outright interfere with someone else's slipstream. Just get in the way or just cut it off at an angle, right? And so that's why if you go back to the swag defending, I talk a lot about the importance of the defense setting that back line and keeping a strong end of the last line of defense. Because without that last line of defense, opposing players, the opponent's slipstream, can easily see a clear lane cut to the ball. In fact, in most situations, goals are scored because of that. Because someone is not checking that opposing players or that attacking player's slipstream. And so they're easily able to just slip into it using either their left foot or their right foot, sticking with it, and then just scoring. And I'll get more into how you essentially get into it right now. You kind of have figured it out. But so that's the idea of a slipstream. I know that was a little abstract. I was cutting a lot, but I hope you bear with me, and I hope that really made sense because it's a real fucking game changer. A lot of times, like, games are literally won because one team can actually take advantage of a slipstream and another can't, right? One team, instead of like just passing back unnecessarily or just playing or just letting themselves just being veered off course all the time, they just stay focused on that goal and they just move forward and then they score, right? So to get into it, essentially the idea of getting into a slipstream ties back into the swag team play video. And the goal is, like, first you want to make sure that the ball is at zero, right? I'll talk more about that. It's at rest, meaning it doesn't have any motion to it, and it's like a brand new baby, and it's just there waiting for you to move it, right? This is why it's so important to really get down trapping, because trapping nulls the ball or brings it at zero. If you don't trap the ball, what happens is more than likely whatever movement you do will have an unbalanced force to it, right? And so because it's an unbalanced force, whatever happens after that it's almost like washing sumo bots. Like, you're just going to be running after the ball instead of you telling the ball where to go, right? So you always want to make sure that you trap the ball, that you balance the energy. because then whenever you pass it to your teammate or you cross it or you shoot, it's going to be a balanced pass. It's going to be a balanced cross. It's going to be a balanced shot. And what that means is everything that has to do with the moment after the ball leaves with you will have a higher chance of working, because the ball would be in a state of motion that is more conducive to attaching another motion, another force, another movement to it. It's kind of like Legos or playing Tetris, right? Like, you don't want to build this fucking block of Legos like all over the place. Or like Jenga, for example, right? You don't want to build your fucking tower or castle or whatever with like one block here, another block here. You want it to be balanced. You want it to be nice and flush on each other, right? That way, like, the base is solid, the supporting structures are solid, and then whatever is on top is supported by that, and you know it will be solid. It's essentially having legs to stand on. And it's the same thing for your passes. You don't want your passes coming in unbalanced, and then where, like, for your teammate to do anything with it, they have to first trap it. And because it's unbalanced, they're having to spend more energy than they would have had to had it been balanced, right? Another thing, when balanced movements actually take no energy. You consume no energy because it's literally just riding on the wave, right? Because it's so flush, you're kind of just moving with the energy that is already there. So that's the importance of that. But essentially, trapping the ball is really, really important because of that. And from there on, once you trap the ball, the question you always have to ask yourself is, what foot do you use, right? Do you use your left foot or do you use your right foot? Now, the reason why is because you want to think of your slipstream it's like one lane, right? But depending on, kind of like, imagine a car that's like veering off at a high speed from a parking garage, right? I'm taking the context of exaggerated ones where they go vroom, and then they almost kind of like skirt to the side and then they go. So my point is, every time that you make a movement on the ball, that's essentially what's happening. You're essentially almost veering off a little bit and then you're moving straight, right? So depending on what foot you're using, the foot that you're using, the first foot, your first touch, will dictate the angle and, as you guessed it, the vector of the fucking slipstream going forward. If you touch it with your right foot, it's actually going to go this way, right? So your slipstream will almost have like this, it'll be rolling like this, right? Kind of like what is this? Counterclockwise roll to it, right? If you're touching with your left foot, it will be rolling like this. So it'll have somewhat of a clockwise roll to it. And my point is, this roll will literally dictate the possible options and movements that you will have available to you after that first touch, right? So if it's rolling this way, if you're touching with your right foot first, so the ball is rolling that way, right? So that means that the next touch is either a stabilizing right touch again, or if you've or it's some sort of like, you touch it and then maybe it rolls a bit forward again, and then maybe you try to touch it with your left foot again. But see how, like, no matter what you do, it's still going along that path. It goes this way, right? If you're touching with the left foot, it goes that way. Now, my point in saying this is that it's really important to get that down, because that's actually the difference between scoring a fucking goal and not, right? Literally what comes to mind is like the World Cup. I think it's like it was like the final, Mbappe's goal. You could see him, he was literally just dipping, right, across the sidelines. And no matter what the defender tried to do, he could not stop him from controlling the ball because he was perfectly flush with that rightward roll with the ball. And so he had, essentially, he touched it, and then he had all that fucking path available to him to get to the goal, right? And so my point is, it's so important to think about where you're going with the ball before touching it, because that first touch dictates everything. So many times you'll see teams that should be scoring, but because the person, there's like one or two people who always have the ball, and they just touch it in the wrong way, they literally cut off all of the scoring possibilities or opportunities for that team simply by that. And so that's why I'm always striving to like instill that importance of playing with both feet and then looking at both sides of the field, right? Like essentially stretching your vision. A lot of people, when you see them play, they're used to only playing one side of it, right? But like you have this whole fucking 45 and 45. You have this whole 90-degree fucking scope of vision, right? So take advantage of that, and it will really make a big difference. So that's kind of getting into the slipstream, right? And also I went into a little bit how that affects defense and offense, right? Another thing that I wanted to add, just kind of reinforcing how it affects the defense, is going back to that idea of moving in sync or in unison with your team, right? Like watching out for the fucking triangle, right? Not being so far apart that you leave a huge gap in the formation, and then not being so close that there's an entire sector that can be played right by you, right? But just staying at like a good equilateral triangle distance apart from each other, right? When clearly, as I was doing this with the hands, you can actually see how like this would leave huge gaps for a slipstream to come through, right? And that's the whole point of that swag defending video. Because when you play in a squad and you're at like equal distance from each other, just you guys staying in sync like that will cover you from all angles, and it will prevent gaps in the fucking defense from occurring, right? Going back to that 300, every man has a spear with a fucking shield covering him from the neck down to the torso, holding it at a position to where he's not only covering himself, but the man next to him. And that's the same concept that you want to have in defense. You're not only covering yourself, you're not only covering that hole, but you're also covering the people around you, right? So when you rush forward like that in a way where you're going too fast, right, and they can't adequately cover your vector in a way, for example, you're running and they cannot, okay, he's going, so I'm just going to slightly move into his area to kind of check him. You're going too fast, then you're just fucking everything up, because now that person's like, and then he's open there, and it destroys everything. If you look at most games, that's how people lose, right? And then now I was really excited to just talk about it on the side of offense, right? Because it ties into it too, especially vectors. And I'm kind of going to take, I think it was the swag offense graphic, where there's like three dots, and then one's going forward, one's going to the side, and then one's going left, right? As I mentioned, there's only so many possibilities when you're constrained by a goal, right? So if you think about it, most of the time, what you'll have, this is me, right? I have the ball. There's my teammate. He's next to me. And then there's someone else, right? And then what I always try people to do is just go forward, right? Don't veer off or fucking steer the slipstream away until you have to. until you encounter an obstacle, right? And let the obstacle kind of push you into making a decision. Essentially, go with it and then deal with it at that moment, right? But not before. So always go straight. And then what happens is you will get checked, right? Someone will come and then they will try to stop you, right? So you usually have a couple options. It's either some combination of you either beat him, and for that to happen, you're actually going to have to cut off one of your options, right? So you have a teammate here, and you have a teammate there. If you decide to beat this guy, what that means is, say I decide to beat him, and I'm going to, because I saw that maybe he's uncovered on his left side, right? So I'm going to take the left side. What that means is I'm literally going to take this person out of the play, or out of the possibilities of options, or options of possibilities that I can choose in that moment, right? Because now I'm cutting him off, this teammate is forced to make a decision. And this is where slipstream really come in handy. What he should do, what he can do, is actually run ahead of you. And so by doing that, he's actually taking on fucking fire, right? He's like, there's more people in him running forward. Defenders are going to see, okay, this guy is a potential pass option, right? So we're going to cover him. So now he's drawing attention towards him, leaving this fucking gap of area for you to take this guy, right? So you're gonna take him, right? He's running forward. Now there's the space, and then now on top of that, because these two guys decided to check him, there's also this gap. So there's a gap right here, and then there's a gap right there. Your teammate is there, right, about to get checked, and then this is the guy coming at you, and you're gonna take him in this area, right? But now you've seen that you went from being on the middle to now being on the left side, right? Your friend, even though he's on the side, he now has to make a decision should he keep running on the sidelines, or should he move into the middle? And this is where fucking swag team play and really understanding like dynamics between players come into play, right? Because players that have like good IQ and can vibe with each other will actually know, okay, instead of just running down the sidelines unnecessarily, why don't I just switch, right? So you went to the left, you're now on the side, I'll move into the middle. And then this switch will cause almost like a gap. It's like opening space, right? Because remember, the slipstream was straightforward, then it almost got cut off, right, by this obstacle. Remember that law of physics? Acting in motion until landed upon by another force. It got cut off, right? Now you decided, or say even maybe the guy didn't come balanced, right? Because the only way to cut off a slipstream completely is by squarely coming forward to meet the play, meaning you meet him exactly. You're not overstepping, and then you're not too behind, but you're literally meeting that force. That's the only way. Anything else will actually just vary. It will divert it off based on the angle of your body, right? So if flush is like, say, directly in front of me, this is, let's say, what angle is that? 180? Or yeah, this is 180 degrees, right? I'm being met, right? If they're like coming at me with this angle, then what happens is my slipstream gets diverted, right? So now instead of it being going straight, it now moves, it bounces off him, right? It goes that way, right? If I'm like coming at this angle, right? Or if I'm coming at this angle, it gets diverted. And essentially, the more and more in balance you are, the more and more you'll look like this. The more and more balanced you are, the more and more you look like that, right? Now, them switching is essentially, so this guy, let's say that he cut me off perfectly, right? So now I have to essentially run back. I have to run to the left side, or actually, sorry, I was going to beat this guy, right? So the only way you can ever beat someone is because they're coming with an unbalanced force, right? So he's coming at me with this side. So not only, and you can clearly see, even as I'm showing it, what it looks like when you're in balance, right? Your foot, the stance, all this shit, right? So I beat him, and clearly my slipstream is being diverted. But remember, right, the fucking swag teammate, he sees I'm about to take in, so instead of letting that slipstream go off to the side, he curls it, right? So he switches. And so now, instead of it going off to the side, it's literally being stitched back into place. Right? And that's the fucking power of like good teamwork, right? And fucking, for example, if like you're in war, they'll tell you to like check your corners, and then they'll say like someone's running point, meaning you're like at the tip of the spear, and then you want to make sure that you have like a teammate there that's covering this corner, a teammate there that's covering that corner, and then someone behind you that's covering that corner, right? And the goal, the point of it is always having all your angles covered, and then at the same time always being able to support one another. Meaning if someone is taking on heavy fire, you can essentially cover him at a distance or at an angle that doesn't leave you exposed, but at the same time makes you super fucking effective, right? And that's kind of what I wanted to bring into this, and that's kind of the idea behind the drawing of this video, is that you always want to be cognizant of your fucking angles, right? What angles do you have exposed to you? And then what is essentially your coverage zone, right? If you're running along, if you keep running down the sideline, it does nothing to you, because what are the possible options for someone who has the ball here to make that would make scoring a goal easier? If they pass it to you and you're running down the sidelines, what happens is you end up with the ball, but then because you're essentially in a position where it's so easy to trap you, right? Like, it's so easy for these defenders to just circle you around and get the ball from you before you pass it back, for example. Then that means it's not a good decision, right? And that's essentially the whole point of this video. By thinking about having slipstreams in mind, you're able to think about better decisions. Because you can have the gnarliest fucking footwork in the world, but if someone is thinking ahead of you, is putting just a bit more thought, you're going nowhere. How I concretely display this is fucking Brazil now and Brazil fucking 2002, right? With Ronaldinho, Roberto Carlos, those fucking legendary ass niggas. Like literally, it felt like watching, like you're watching like a song being composed. Every single time they were dribbling, they always dribbled in a way to where they could just every movement was conducive to helping the teammate get a better pass or score a goal. It wasn't none of this bullshit today where you see dudes, I literally liken it to watching sumo bots playing. They're just like running into each other. There's little to no thought. It seems like they're just trying to like show how flashy they can be, but then they end up either losing the ball or putting themselves in positions that's like nearly impossible. When in reality, they could have just done one or two things really simple but super effective that would have made it possible for like an inside pass and then like a goal, right? That's literally what I was kind of striving to communicate in this video. Like everything that you do should be conducive to helping the ones around you be in a better position or helping the team essentially be in a better position, right? Helping the team get closer to the goal, helping the team making it to where it's easier for your teammate to trap the ball, making it easier, essentially setting your teammate up for the layup. That's literally the goal of fucking creative footwork. That's literally how I see it. And if you have that in mind, it actually makes your life a hell of a lot more funner because everything gets simpler, but then everything gets more beautiful. And then because of that, everything becomes more effective, right? So to go back, instead of just running down the sidelines, go for that switch, right? He's going into the sidelines, so you go in the middle, right? And then remember that I've always only been talking about these guys. There's still this guy. So what does he do? He's still just running down the sidelines, and then instead of just staying, he's either stretching the play if he sees that like there's area here, there's like a pocket of space that he could be playing, or he's like assisting this play. If he sees that, for example, and this guy's switching, this guy is definitely about to pass it to him, and it'd be really useful to have someone sitting there to either set up a shot or set up a pass, right? But like having that idea of slipstreams in mind, of not getting in the way of your teammates, and then more particularly of helping your teammate be in a better position energetically, and then by that virtue everything else, then everything becomes so much more streamlined. It makes your decisions almost second nature, right? Because now, instead of you thinking, oh, I have the ball, what do I do? I'm just going to like run in a circle because I know I can. You start going, oh, he's open, this guy's open, so maybe, and then there's some space in front of him. I can take 2 steps and then pass it to him. And then like he can do the same thing, 2 steps, pass it. And then because I laid it off, I can run ahead of the obstacle. But most likely because the obstacle is going to like try to slow me down, this guy's going to be free, right? This guy's going to be free. So then instead of just trying to like fight each other for the ball, I can actually switch because this guy's checking me. So he's easily going to draw. He's easily going to get drawn into wherever I'm going. So I can just switch, right? So essentially you're always trying to see when does it make sense to switch and when doesn't it, right? And now talking about the draw, there was something else I wanted to add when it came to fucking defense is that don't get drawn into the pool, right? A lot of times you'll actually see how teams, even though they have solid players, solid defense, whatever, they'll still you can have like a flawless form, like flawless defense technique, flawless positioning, but then because some guy like is too dumb to recognize that or grow aware of the fact that he's being pulled in, right? Like he's getting drawn in maybe by players' intuition or players' IQ understanding of what he's doing. Maybe they're too tired, blah, blah, blah. He might, instead of realizing that he's essentially getting sucked in. Maybe he's coming off the line, right? Or maybe he's just like following him without really thinking about it. He'll actually create the hole that will fucking give opportunities to the offense for them to score, right? So always be aware of your surroundings and what's going on. And it's so funny how 9 times out of 10, those are those moments when you'll actually make an impact on the game. You'll make like an impactful stop, or you will be there at the right time, simply because you took the time to take a step back, look at the big picture of the field, maybe see that, we're lacking on like the sidelines, or we don't have a wing, or we don't have like an offensive line, right? Or a defensive line, right? Or even we don't even have a fucking mid. Just being cognizant of the field and reading the game as a whole game, like a whole one picture, instead of just like, this is your part, this is what you do. You'll have a tremendous advantage over the competition who are just thinking short term, who are